History is often written in ink, but sometimes it is written in spittle and rage. We like to imagine the great scientific institutions of the 19th century as temples of quiet contemplation, where bearded men in tweed suits solemnly unlocked the secrets of the cosmos. But in 1881, the Harvard College Observatory was less a temple and more a pressure cooker waiting to explode. The air was thick with the smell of developing chemicals and the sound of scratching quills. But the tension didn't come from the stars. It came from the incompetence on the ground. Edward Charles Pickering, the director of the observatory, was a man at the end of his rope. He was a visionary who wanted to map the entire sky, to capture the spectral signature of every visible star. But visionaries need hands to do the work, and the hand Pickering had hired were failing him. The archives tell us that his team of male assistants, young men from good families with degrees and pedigrees, were sloppy, they were lazy, their calculations were riddled with errors, their cataloging was haphazard, and their dedication was practically non-existent. Imagine the frustration of a perfectionist watching his life's work being dismantled by the apathy of his subordinates. One afternoon, the dam finally broke. Pickering stormed into the workroom, slamming a stack of ruined data sheets onto a desk. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by a shout that would echo through the corridors of history, though for decades it was treated as a mere anecdote. "My Scotch maid could do better." It was intended as the ultimate insult, a scathing critique of the educated men standing before him. To compare a Harvard graduate to a domestic servant was, in the social hierarchy of 1881, a devastating blow. But for Edward Pickering, it wasn't just a figure of speech, it was a hypothesis. And unlike his assistants, Pickering was a man who tested his theories. He fired the men, and then he did the unthinkable. He went home and spoke to the woman dusting his library. Her name was Williamina Fleming. History might have preferred her to remain a footnote, a nameless servant fading into the background of a great man's biography. But Williamina was not just a maid, she was a survivor, recently abandoned by her husband, pregnant and alone in a foreign country. She was 24 years old and desperate. She had taken the job at Pickering's house simply to survive, to put bread on the table for the child she was carrying. When Pickering offered her the job at the observatory, it wasn't an act of charity, it was a challenge. He handed her the columns of numbers, the logarithmic tables, the chaotic data that had defeated his male team. He didn't ask for a degree, he asked for accuracy. It is chilling to think how easily she could have refused. She could have stayed with her feather duster, safe in the invisibility of her station. But she didn't. She put down the broom and picked up the pen. In that moment, the hierarchy of the Ivy League was quietly subverted. The Scotch maid walked into the Harvard Observatory not to clean the floors, but to clean up the mess left by the men who thought they owned the stars. She sat at a desk that wasn't meant for her, in a world that didn't want her, and she began to work. She didn't just do better, she began to rewrite the standard for excellence in astronomy, proving that genius has no gender and no pedigree. But as she would soon learn, competence is dangerous when it comes from the wrong person. We must understand the nature of the work Williamina Fleming undertook. It was not the romantic stargazing of poets, it was the grueling industrial processing of the universe. In the late 19th century, astronomy was shifting from the eye to the camera. The telescope would capture the night sky on fragile glass photographic plates, preserving the stars as tiny gray smudges on a dark background. These plates were the raw data of the cosmos, and analyzing them required a level of patience and precision that bordered on the superhuman. This was the era of the human computer, and Williamina Fleming became the prototype for a new kind of scientist.
Day after day, she sat bent over a magnifying glass, staring into the frozen grain of the universe. She wasn't just counting stars, she was classifying them. She looked at the spectral lines, the tiny barcodes of light that revealed what a star was made of, and she began to see patterns that others had missed. While the men who came before her saw only tedious repetition, Fleming saw a language. She developed a new system for classifying stars based on the amount of hydrogen observed in their spectra, a system so elegant and effective that it became the foundation for the Draper catalog of stellar spectra. She was processing thousands of plates, her eyes scanning the heavens frame by frame. Then came the year 1888. It was a year that should be etched in gold in every astronomy textbook, yet for so long it was obscured. Fleming was examining plate B2312. It was a photograph of the constellation Orion, a region of the sky teeming with nebulas and bright stars. As she swept her magnifier across the plate, something caught her eye. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a bright nebula. It was a shadow. In her logbook, in her neat, precise handwriting, she noted a semicircular indentation about 5 minutes in diameter, located south of the star Al-Nitak. Describe that moment. The room was likely silent, save for the scratching of pens. Outside, the world was bustling with the noise of the Industrial Revolution, but in here, Williamina Fleming was the first human being in history to consciously recognize one of the most iconic structures in the galaxy. She had found the Horsehead Nebula. To the untrained eye, it was just a dark patch, a flaw in the photograph. But Fleming understood what she was seeing. It was a dark nebula, a cloud of dust and gas so dense it blocked the light of the stars behind it. It was a silhouette against the infinite. Her discovery was a triumph of observational brilliance. Her male predecessors, the ones with the degrees and the arrogance, had likely looked at similar plates and seen nothing but dirt. Fleming saw a cosmic sculpture. She identified it, cataloged it, and defined its position with absolute precision. The irony is palpable. The woman who had been hired as a joke, the maid who was supposed to simply be better than the incompetent men, had just made a discovery that would adorn the walls of observatories and teenage bedrooms for centuries to come. She had looked into the abyss and found a horse's head staring back. It was a moment of pure connection between a woman whom society deemed insignificant and a celestial object of immense grandeur. But as she closed the logbook on plate B2312, the machinery of erasure was already beginning to turn. The discovery was hers, the eyes that saw it were hers, but the name attached to it would not be.
The tragedy of Williamina Fleming is not that she failed, but that she succeeded too well in a world that wasn't ready to credit her. The Horsehead Nebula, that magnificent dark tower of dust, was a jewel in the crown of Harvard Observatory. When the discovery was published in the prestigious Dreyer Index catalog, the world leaned in to see who had found this wonder. And there, in black and white, was the credit. Pickering. Not Fleming, not Williamina, just Pickering. Technically, the credit was given to the institution, to the director under whose authority the work was done. This was the convention of the time. The captain gets credit for the ship's journey, not the sailor who actually spots land. But this bureaucratic erasure stings with a particular cruelty. Readers and astronomers across the globe assumed that the great Edward Charles Pickering had spent his nights hunched over the telescope or the magnifying glass. They praised his sharp eyes. They lauded his dedication. Meanwhile, the woman who actually found it was listed merely as an assistant, her identity swallowed whole by the reputation of her employer. For decades, the name Williamina Fleming was a whisper, while Pickering was a shout. She became the leader of what was dismissively termed Pickering's harem, a group of women hired by the director to process data cheaper and faster than men. The term itself reeks of the sexism that defined her era.
It reduced a team of brilliant mathematicians and astronomers to the status of a collection, possessions of the man who signed their paychecks. These women, with Fleming at the helm, classified over 10,000 stars. They discovered novae, variable stars, and nebulae. They built the map of the universe that we use today, and yet they were paid a fraction of a man's wage and given a fraction of the credit. Fleming's journals reveal the toll this took. She wrote of her frustration with the low pay, noting that she worked late into the night while earning less than a factory worker. She was aware of the injustice. She knew that if she were a man, her discoveries would have made her a titan of science. Instead, she had to fight for every scrap of recognition. She was the first woman to hold the title of Curator of Astronomical Photographs at Harvard, a title she had to wrestle from the administration. But even then, the textbooks remained stubborn. For most of the 20th century, the Horsehead Nebula was simply a fact of nature, its discoverer an ambiguous Harvard. It has taken more than a century for the fog to clear. Historians, digging through the dusty logs and the polite omissions of the past, have finally peeled back the label of Pickering to reveal the name underneath. We now know that it was the Scotch Maid who saw the stars. We know that the single mother, working to feed her child, looked further into the dark than the men who mocked her station. Today, we restore the theft. We take the credit back from the institution and place it in the hands of the individual. Williamina Fleming didn't just clean up the observatory, she cleared the way for every woman who has looked up since. The Horsehead Nebula belongs to her. And now, finally, so does her name.